Hello, movie lovers. Today I'm going to try a little something different. I've been doing mostly single movie videos of physical releases, and I'll continue to do that, but I'm facing some big bills in the next few months, and I have to cut back a little bit. I'm always envious of movie collectors that do YouTube videos that seemingly buy everything. I'm certainly never going to be able to do that. And I am a charter subscriber of the Criterion Channel, so I only pay $10 a month for what really is the bulk of the Criterion collection is on the channel. And last time I looked, 183 Criterion editions were there, which means you get the movie plus you get all the supplements. So I'm going to take advantage of that and make videos of 3 or 4 different movies sort of themed together, as sort of a movie diary. I'm not going to go into great depth on them. Not that I ever go into great depth on the movies, but nevertheless, I'm going to try this out and see how it goes. So I chose for the first video in this new series, I chose horror movies and horror movies that are on the Criterion Channel. And the first one up is The Brood, and The Brood is in the collection in both Blu-ray and DVD, I believe, directed by David Cronenberg, and it stars Art Hindle, Oliver Reed, Samantha Eggar. And it is truly a horror movie. I think Cronenberg often says that it is the first of his horror, his true classic horror movies. I think he actually called this his classic horror movie. And certainly is the movie that really brought him some newfound attention all around the world. And it's, although it's a horror movie, it's also an autobiographical movie because it's based on his own experiences with his wife and his little girl, in which he had to, I believe, rescue her from some cult that his wife had become involved with. And it's really, it's also an expression of rage, of the destructive power of rage, and especially in the influence on the children. Of course, we're also going to get body horror, and there's, as you always would expect in these kind of David Cronenberg films, and there's a spectacular example of body horror in the final act of this movie. Now, I got to admit, I'm not the greatest horror film fan. I'm never comfortable watching explicit and graphic violence against women. I'm equally uncomfortable watching children participating in this kind of in these kind of violent scenes. But I know horror films are, the driving force pretty much of physical release. The popularity, whatever is left of it, of physical release, a lot of it is from horror fans. So I put my moral qualms aside. I also don't like the sight of blood, but in this film and in movies in this era, the blood looks so fake. So I wasn't too much bothered. There's a considerable amount of blood in this film, but and as far as the horror here in the final act of this film is truly amazing. I mean, it really is. You could see Cronenberg's reputation really growing in his ability to deliver the thrills and chills in a very, not just efficient way, but sometimes artistic way. So it's a big film for him, and it's the first film I believe he made with big stars: Oliver Reed, Samantha Eggar. Samantha Eggar, there is a supplement on the channel where she is interviewed fairly recently, where she recalls her experience making the film. It only took 4 days. They did all her scenes within 4 days because she was in a Hollywood TV show or movie. Oliver Reed's very good. Great stories about how he would go out and get thrown out of his hotel and drunkenness and wandered the streets of Toronto late at night. Naked, and then he would show up the next day and be absolutely letter perfect. He was just a kind, gentle soul. Samantha Eggar knew him his whole life from the time they were children, and you know, the effects of alcohol didn't seem to interfere with his acting. And so they're very good. Art Hindle is actually the star of the movie, although Oliver Reed and Samantha Eggar are above the title. Art Hindle is in most of the scenes as the father trying to rescue his daughter from this cult. It's actually by Oliver Reed, who is really doing some sort of experimental therapy. Okay, the next up, and I'm going backwards, that was 1979. I'm going backwards in these four films, is Wait Until Dark. And Wait Until Dark stars Audrey Hepburn, Alan Arkin, Richard Crenna, Jack Weston in a really fun role. It is comes from a Frederick Knott play, screenplay, and a big hit on Broadway. And he also wrote Dial-M for Murder for Alfred Hitchcock. So, and again, as in both of these films, it's mostly set in an apartment with a woman who becomes under siege. In this case, Audrey Hepburn is playing a blind woman. She knows every nook and cranny of her apartment. Her husband has inadvertently gotten possession of a doll that is full of drugs. The bad guys want to find it. They couldn't find it in the apartment when both Audrey Hepburn and her husband were out of the apartment. He's sent away on a false trip by these crooks. And then Audrey Hepburn's life obviously becomes very much in danger. And the one thing that Audrey Hepburn has here is the advantages that she knows the dark. So Wait Until Dark, and boy, you could call this a suspense movie more than a horror movie, I suppose. But I thought the final act in this one as well is really horrifying, and especially Alan Arkin, who plays the villain, and he is just, you look at him, he's like an old melodrama from the 1800s. You just look at him and you want to hiss. His black hair combed forward, these tiny little black sunglasses, so Audrey Hepburn's in trouble, but she's she has a lot of ingenuity, a lot of imagination. So next up, that's 67. This is from 1960, and this is Eyes Without a Face. The glare doesn't pick up the writing, but this also is a Criterion movie in the Criterion collection, I believe on Blu-ray. Yeah, it's on Blu-ray. The Wait Until Dark is a Warner Archive title, but this is in the collection, and it's directed by George Franju, starring Pierre Brassier, Alida Valli, one of my favorite actresses from The Third Man and from Senso and many other films. And it is a film that I think it's a horror film. It's sort of, again, we have a doctor who is got a very good reputation. He doesn't, he has a nefarious practice back in his mansion. Vivisection is sort of implied. We hear barking dogs constantly, which really adds to the eerie tone of the film. His daughter has been in a car accident with her father. Her injuries caused her to lose her face. And the father now wants to do whatever is necessary to give her a new face. The horror here is really the operation. You see an operation on a face in close-up, great detail, scalpel on skin. That is generally why I had to look away. But it's a very creepy movie. George Franju was a French director. He had a great streak going here because Judex, I think, was his previous film. Spotlight on a Murder was his subsequent film, and I highly recommend both of those, especially Spotlight on a Murder is sort of a movie that has fallen through the cracks, but and he was a very elegant director, very classical, slow burn kind of build up, but the mise en scène is really beautiful in Eyes Without a Face. Again, this is 1960. And I'll end up with 1957's that's themed Without a Face. And the glare is really hard here, but this too in the Criterion Collection, 1957, directed by Arthur Crabtree and starring Marshall Thompson. And it involves a U.S. Air Force base in Canada, way up in Manitoba. There's a small town nearby, and people in this small town are dying under very mysterious circumstances. The townspeople think that these deaths are caused by radiation from this Air Force base, and they do indeed have an atomic reactor there, and they are sending energy up into space, into their jets that are flying above, as an experimental thing. But there is no radiation. You know, the Air Force Base investigates, they don't find radiation, but the base is being blamed for the deaths of the town people. And this movie really plays into the fears that people in the U.S. and probably all around the world had with radiation because of the bombs that were dropped on Japan. And even if you survive an atomic bomb, how are you going to survive radiation? And the whole anxiety over atomic energy in and of itself, because it was brand new, and you know, what have we unleashed in science? But the horror comes later in the film. The fiends, we see the fiends. Eventually, we see fiends, and of course, it's 1950s low budget sci-fi horror. They're a little bit cheesy, but they're fun. I mean, this is a pretty fun movie, especially in the final act where there's a final showdown. It does have a love story. All these movies had to have a beautiful woman falling in love, and you got to end with a kiss. And but these films were shown on television all the time. I'm sure I saw this on TV at the time. But I got to admit, I'm a bit surprised it's in the Criterion Collection. But it's definitely one of the sci-fi / horror movies that are worth seeing. Okay, so thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen to me. I really appreciate it. Comments are always welcome. You guys take care.